I am Kosj Yamoah. I am an oncologist and a scientist, and I'm an ATRT dad. So the first time I heard the word ATRT was actually when I was in first year of residency, and I was sitting next to my chief resident, and they talked about a child with ATRT, and I said, "What's that?" So yeah, that's that brain tumor. They don't do well. I'm like, oh wow, that was it. Never had a case, never saw one, never really did much with it. It's just one of those, oh wow, and you move on. I had a very tough experience during my pediatric rotation working with children with cancer. And it really took a toll on me, and I loved it, but it was so hard that I remember, walking out of the last day of my rotation. I looked up to heaven. I said, God, thank you for the experience. I never want to do this ever again. I'm not doing this. I can't. It's just too hard. Fast forward maybe a year or so later, our firstborn son, Zion, got diagnosed with ATRT. Now, at that point, I was actually almost finished with training. I was about to move into Tampa, really, to start a new job. And things were looking great. And I was actually set to fly out to Orlando for a conference and had my slides prepared. I booked my flight. And that Thursday, everything changed. That was where we first learned that Zion had a brain tumor. In fact, it was just, I did my own neurologic exam on him, and I knew something was wrong. Just being a physician, I just said, this can't be right. And I remember feeling this, when you know something is bad, and you know it could be really bad, and you go through the list of options, and you're hoping is the least devastating one. I was praying it's just a viral thing that is affecting his nerves and that he's going to bounce back. And I called a pediatrician, and once he said, bring him in, I'm like, this cannot be good. And very quickly, the room filled up with a lot of people. And I sat there and I was hoping that this would be a nightmare that's going to be all over. But no, it was just the beginning of a nightmare. Went through, a series of consultations, and I'm straddling being an oncologist and listening, and being a husband, and, being a dad. And yeah, that was confusing. That was very confusing, because I could understand what they're saying. I knew how bad it was, but then I'm trying to also translate that to my wife, Jamie, and trying to also be there as a father for my son. And I feel so helpless. And I know that this is something that is really, really, really bad. And I'm just stuck. And in some ways, it was a very hard place, because I had a battle of my mind where I wanted more, but I knew there's nothing. And my heart is telling me there has to be more, but my mind is saying, you know what this is about. There's nothing. And so they come in the room and they talk about the chemo and the radiation and all those things. I'm like, wow, is this really happening? Is this real? So it got to the point where I felt like I was a failure all around, right? Because I felt like I'm an oncologist, yet I can't even help the one I care about the most. I can't help my son. I felt like I'm a failure because I can't be as supportive as I wanted to be as a husband, and I can't help my son. I'm not a great father because I feel like I'm just struggling. And that 360 feeling of failure was really eating me alive. And I have to say that throughout that journey, there were times where my heart hurt so much that it felt like someone was actually literally like strangling my heart. It was physical pain, so much emotional pain that it translates physical pain. And at that point, I knew, no, that's not good. Like I'm dying and I'm sick because I'm in such emotional turmoil. I'm trying to manage the job and trying to even be present and do medicine, practice medicine, when my entire world is falling apart and there's nothing on planet Earth that can save my son. And to me, that was the crisis moment where, I'm a person of faith, and I believe God, and I believe in faith, and I believe in miracles. And I stood firm knowing that whatever this is, God is going to see me through. And yes, still that pain and that intense feeling of helplessness and hopelessness was palpable. But what encouraged me a lot through the journey was really Jamie, my wife, and Zion, believe it or not, his faith, his perseverance, his love for music, and his smile. And it's just, he goes through everything as a champion. He doesn't complain. He just loves to his superheroes. And our daughter Zoe, who was our life. And I realized that those things matter. My family held us through in spite of the struggle, the real struggle. And Zion had the surgery, had the chemotherapy, had the radiation, and then within about 6 weeks, everything came right back. I had the painful privilege of being called into the physician rec room because I was one of them. So they would call me back into the room, and who'll be reading my son's scans together. And at one point, it's just like, I'm sitting there with the oncologist and we are both looking at his scan, and like, God, like we are looking at all these lesions on his spine and his brain and his spine, and to the point where I couldn't count them anymore. And I'm looking at Zion, and he's running around, and like he's like a regular kid, like nothing touched him. And I'm looking at his scan, it's like two separate people. Like I couldn't believe what I'm seeing. And at that point, everything in my body, knowing what I know, is telling me that he's not gonna make it. But I'm trying to keep hope alive because I'm looking at him and he's as joyful as anything. And I'm like, I have to keep hope alive. I have to be there for him. I have to let him know that his dad loves him to the ends of the world, and that I'll do anything for him. And knowing that in his innocence, he just knows that this is his life. And I sat back and said, Zion's life, he spent half of his life in hospitals, right? And so to him, that's his world. He doesn't know anything more than that. That's his world. And I'm here just learning so much from, a barely 4-year-old kid, and seeing how much he's teaching me about life. And, I always say that I'll do anything to have him back. But what I know is that as long as I live, I'll dedicate myself, my life, to make it better for somebody else, another family that if they are facing something like this, one, they'll know they're not alone. And two, I'll do everything in my power to make sure that they don't experience what I went through. That has been my mission. That's what Hope for ATRT is doing. Don't assume you know what they're going through. Going through life and knowing you're going to lose a child is not like any other loss. Life is designed that we lose certain things that are maybe older than us, or certain people that are maybe older, and life revolves around that. And so in some ways we are prepared for things like that, as painful and as devastating as they may be, not to minimize it. But when you're losing a child, it's like your world is turned upside down. And sometimes I'd like people to know that it's okay to try to help, but more importantly, to be there for them, because you don't assume you know what they're going through, because you really don't. And you being there speaks volumes than trying to help to fix it, because they are trying their best to fix it and they can't. Sometimes the best way is to be there and do more listening than talking, because it's healing when you're there, and sometimes not so much when you're talking. I wanted a dad to know that, or dads all around the world that might be facing this battle, to know that, one thing, they're not alone, and two, don't quit. Everything you tells you that you're not doing a great job. Everything tells you could do more. And the closer you get, the more it hurts. And so the initial knee-jerk reaction is to peel away. Don't. Everyone needs you. Your presence sometimes speaks volumes. And when you check out, maybe not physically, but emotionally, it's palpable and it's felt. And I know it's hard as dads. We grieve differently, and that's something I learned. There are times where Jimmy is grieving and I want to be in a different space because it's too hard to go into that space, and I'm peeling away. But no, you're there for each other. And you may grieve differently, and you have to talk it through and what that looks like. Because in those times of ups and downs, you may be in sync sometimes and out of sync sometimes, but working through it is as important as trying to find relief, because finding relief is elusive. It's like a mirage. And I'll just say stick in there and seek help, seek support. Man, we are not too big or too strong or too good for support. In fact, sometimes we need it more. And we don't like to talk, but when we open our mouths, people listen. And sometimes our story can change the world. So let's speak. let's advocate, and let's be there and make change. Our goal at Hope for ATRT is that families that are facing this diagnosis will know that they are not alone. Our kids are worth the fight.